Welcome to the Everything Cancer podcast, where guests offer insight into the honest survivor experience, how challenges are met head on, where blessings are discovered, and helpful information is shared. We are so glad to have you here, and we hope you enjoy today's episode. As you know, the information shared on the Everything Cancer podcast is not intended as medical advice. Always consult with your healthcare team. We would love to hear from you, your suggestions for topics or guests, and your comments about the show at everythingcancerpodcast@gmail.com. Remember to rate us on your favorite podcast platform and tell others about our show. Now on to the episode. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Everything Cancer podcast. We have a model guest with us today, and I mean that figuratively and literally. Kiki Wooten, who I have fallen in love with in the conversations I've had with her, and I think you will too. Kiana has had quite the journey in getting here into the studio seat in the Everything Cancer podcast. And I think you will find her journey that she's going to share with us riveting, heartbreaking, and inspiring all at the same time. And Kiana, I have nothing but admiration for you. Welcome.
Thank you so much, Jill, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm excited about this conversation.
I'm so glad you reached out, and I'm so honored that you're spending time with us and our audience. I think you will end up inspiring a lot of women who have difficult choices to make, and a lot of people who have difficult choices to make about surgery. And I believe that you will inspire many. And you're probably going to have a lot of people who will be nodding their heads as they're listening to you, saying, I've been there. And so thank you. It's an absolute honor to have you spend time with us here today. So first, I want to hear about your hat that is on your LinkedIn profile, your big, vibrant pink hat. Where did you find it, and what does it symbolize for you?
Well, actually, I was going to a photo shoot, and my best friend, her cousin, is a photographer, and I had no idea. She actually got me the hat. She had no idea what I was wearing. I didn't tell her anything about my outfits, and we're shooting. She's like, you're missing something. She's like, something that will really like bring out your face and, your bare chest. And I'm like, okay. She's like, I got you this hat. And she just put it on me. And I was like, what in the world? I'm like, this hat is bigger than I am. And she's just like, just look straight and just pose. And that's what I did. And that's the picture that you see on the cover of the book. And I noticed that once I started posting those pictures, people recognized me from the hat. So I became Kiana with the pink hat. And
you have.
Yeah. And, it's symbolic to me now. I didn't know how symbolic it would be then. So when I'm posting, a lot of people ask me like, oh, do you still have that hat? And I'm like, it wasn't mine. And no, I don't. But they love me in that hat. And I have to say, I hate pink. I've always hated pink. Pink was not my original color, but it has become essentially, my color. And that really is the story about the hat. I had no idea that she even had the hat for me for the photo shoot, and it went so well with the outfit.
Yes, it did. And you say people love you in your hat, but we're all going to love you without the hat today and after today. And obviously people, oh, you're welcome. And obviously people do, because they keep asking you to come back and have you participate in their events. And you're just an amazing representative for Black women who are survivors, and women who are survivors of breast cancer, and women who are survivors of trauma. You went through a lot before you made the choice to be flat-chested, right?
Yes.
And can you share your journey to this choice with our audience? Because it was quite a journey.
It was so, initially I felt a lump, which I honestly just thought was a cyst. Since I was a young adolescent, I would get cysts underneath my armpits or even in my boob area, and it was always normal for me. However, after a few months, I noticed that the cyst didn't go away, and it really was because of my husband that I even went to the doctor. Because, for me, I'm like, I've been with my body my whole life. I know that it's nothing. And I told him, if you want me to waste the copay and go to the doctor, fine. And when I went to the doctor, they were kind of like on the same page. Like they weren't too concerned, but something told me to maybe just ask for a mammogram, because I had never had a cyst kind of just linger for that long. And then I was thinking maybe it was ingrown hair, or maybe something infected, but never in a million years did I think it could be breast cancer. So fast forward to getting the mammogram. Now, I'll remind you, I was only 34 at the time. So this was my first mammogram. And once they did the original mammogram, then they said they had to do a 3D mammogram because I had dense breast tissue, which was my first time ever even hearing those words. And I didn't understand what that meant. But I just went along with the flow. And so they did the 3D mammogram. And then after that, they're like, okay, we need to take you in the back and do an ultrasound. Once again, it's not clicking in my head that this may or may not be normal because I've never had to go through this before. But it did make me kind of nervous because I'm like, well, that wasn't on my script to do an ultrasound. I'm well versed in that type of stuff. And I'm like, oh, can they do that? Or am I going to get charged for that? Because, that's not what the doctor ordered. But so I went in the back, they did the ultrasound, and it started getting kind of like a little uneasy when they said, okay, the doctor will be in to talk to you. Because in my mind, I'm like, what doctor? Whose doctor? My doctor
Right,
is in here,
right.
like, so I was really confused. And, I had gone there for other testing and no doctor has ever come to talk to me about anything any other time. So, I started to get a little nervous, but then I was like, well, maybe this is their protocol. I don't know. And once the doctor came in, he greeted me and he started looking at the images. And he just told me right then and there, he's like, I'm about 99% positive this is some form of malignancy. Now, I'm like, I know what that means. He probably said a ton of other things, but that's all that I heard in that moment. Like, everything really just came to like a stop. And it's something that you kind of see in movies sometimes where
Hmm.
there's a lot going on in the background, but the person is just so focused on, what's happening that they can't even focus or hear things around them. Like, that's where I was. I was in the
Hmm.
matrix.
Right, right.
And then I'm thinking to myself, like, how could this be? I'm only 34. What do I tell my family? Do I tell my family right now? And then I had to think, oh man, I'm by myself. I now have to drive home with this information.
Yeah.
Um, and that was hard. They said that, I needed to have a biopsy for them to determine exactly what type and the grade and things like that. And it was just, it was horrible. It was
Hmm.
horrible because I had no support with me. And then
Right.
as I'm driving home, I literally almost got into a car accident because I couldn't think straight. Um, I didn't know really what to do. My husband was home by the time I got home, and I'm taking off my stuff. He's like, "Hey, you want to watch a movie?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And then I just blurted it out. I'm like, "They think I have breast cancer," and he's like looking at me like, "What are you talking about?" And I just started crying because I couldn't form any other words. And then my husband's crying, and I'm like, okay, in a minute, I need you to kind of get it together because I'm going to need someone to kind of hold me and help me figure this out. So, that was it was really scary. It was really scary, just not
It
knowing,
had
and
to
then
be.
the anxiety of everything on what
Right.
do I do now.
I'm amazed at, and I'm not amazed, knowing what I've heard from other people, at how clearly you remember each moment of that day, how clear it is in your memory. And do you think, Kiana, that had someone told you after the 3D image, we found something that doesn't look right and we want to make sure you get the right care, so we're going to take you back for an ultrasound and then our doctor will talk to you. Do you think, because they're not giving you a diagnosis then, because that's the fear, they can't diagnose because they're not doctors, right? So that's, do you think something like that would have helped ease some of the fear, or do you think it would have increased the fear?
For me personally, and I know everyone is different, I would have liked to have had those little baby steps. Not me just thinking that, oh, okay, this is routine. And I kind of went in there blindsided, not thinking that this was the news that they were going to tell me. So I felt like if I were a little bit more prepared, like, we don't see, or we do see something that's kind of concerning. We just want to double check and make sure. I think that that would have made me feel a lot better. Of course, I still would have been anxious and nervous, but it wouldn't have been like I was just, like I said, just thrown into the matrix.
Right, right,
And they said it like it was absolutely nothing. Like I understand that they deliver this type of news every day, but it was so informal and nonchalant. Like, okay,
right.
so we're gonna send you to get a biopsy, and and I was just like, wait, what?
What?
I
And
yeah,
suddenly life as you know it is changing in one sentence. We're sending you for a biopsy. And you're right. What does that mean? What does that mean? We're sending you for a biopsy. And then what are my steps after that?
yes,
Oh my gosh. Oh my, the uncertainty behind you. I wish
right,
you had had a breast care navigator with you at that moment. It breaks my heart that you didn't.
right.
Um,
So the biopsy was about 2 weeks later, and I was so anxious. And I found out officially October 1st, 2019, when the radiologist called me to inform me that I did, in fact, have breast cancer. It was called invasive ductal carcinoma, stage 2. And I just said, okay. And, like, what do I do now? And then from there, that's where everything just went so fast. Like, okay, you're going to go here. We're going to set you up with, you got your medical oncologist. You're going to have your surgical oncologist. Um, we're going to set you up with a plastic surgeon. And let me step back. They did know that my sister, my older sister, also was battling breast cancer at that time, a different type. So, we needed to do genetic testing to make sure that there wasn't a genetic mutation, and if there was, where it came from. So my sister got tested, I got tested, my mom got tested. They were both fine, but I did have a mutated gene in my ATM RNA. It didn't even show up in my regular DNA. So that kicked in a lot more fear because I have a child, and we all know children share 50% of your DNA, 50% of your spouse's DNA. So automatically, I'm like, oh my gosh, my daughter. And to know that she can't get tested yet is another thing that kind of like, it's very stressful. But getting back to the journey, so I met with the doctors, and it was basically like, okay, we're going to do this, this, and this. So the first step was the genetic testing. I did that, got that out the way. Second step, you're going to have surgery. Now, what surgery would you like? And I'm like, okay, well, if I have this gene, I should probably get them both taken off. Okay, fine. They didn't argue with me about that. That's the one thing that I knew I wanted from day one. But then it was just like, okay, so after that, we'll set you up with a plastic surgeon. And once they send the tumor for testing, that will determine whether you'll have to have chemotherapy, radiation, a combination, or something totally different. So it was like so much crammed in a very small amount of time. Whereas it was almost like they were telling me this was going to be my treatment plan, not really incorporating or asking me, you know, or even saying, these are the treatment options. It was more of like, this is what's going to happen type of thing. So I got the bilateral mastectomy, and they put in what are called tissue expanders to get my chest ready for implants. Now, when I first met the plastic surgeon, he's very nice, great guy. But, the one thing that stood out to me that he said to me, which maybe doctors have to be careful about saying, you're a young woman, you're married, after this, you still want to look like a young woman, right? So I think it's best that if we do like a small B cup, so it was almost like that was the narrative. And that was my only option as far as that goes. Or I could do something like a deep flap where they take, part of your stomach and the back of your thighs to create breast, or they can do fat grafting where they would do liposuction in your stomach and then form the breast. So either way, I felt like I was going to get mutilated. And I was like, oh, well, the implants sound like the lesser of the evils. And I found out that it wasn't. About a month and a half of having the tissue expanders, I started not to feel good. I just had like a very low grade fever, maybe 100. So I called the oncologist and they were like, okay, well, you have to come down to the hospital and we'll have one of the doctors waiting for you. I did that. Um, Before I left, I told my daughter, who was 6 at the time, I'll be back in a few hours. I'm just going to the hospital to get checked. And I learned not to ever tell her things like that, because I did not see her for 2 weeks. And that
Oh
was
my
right,
gosh.
yes, that was
Yeah.
right at the beginning of COVID. And I couldn't have visitors. And it turns out that I had sepsis. And I had no other indications. Like, I wasn't deathly sick. It was just a slight fever. That was all. That was the only symptom that I had.
And you didn't feel quite right.
Yes, and that I didn't feel quite right. But
Right.
that could be chemo that can make you feel that
Hmm.
way. But they had to make sure. And not being able to see my daughter or my family for 2 weeks during the beginning of COVID, and they don't really know much about COVID. I'm in the hospital. I can't have any visitors. Thought for sure that I was going to die in that hospital and that I would never see my family again. That was my mindset. But I made it through, and when I came home, my daughter was so distant from me. She didn't want to hug me. And, it really made me sad. And I was like, are you upset with mommy? And these were her exact words. I'll never forget this day. And she's like, Mommy, you lied to me. And that's something that you said we don't ever do. We don't lie. And in my head, I'm like, what is she talking about? And she's like, you said that you will be right back in a few hours, and I have not seen you. And what else could I do? My 6-year old, she doesn't understand that that was not my intention. And I said that, innocently, because I didn't know that that's what was happening with my body. But in her mind, that's what I said. So that's what she's going to hold me to. And it took us a long time for us to kind of build that relationship back because of this one innocent phrase that I said, that I'll be right back, not knowing that I wasn't going to see her for another 2 weeks. And that was hard. From that, once my sepsis cleared up, I had another emergency surgery. So they took the tissue expanders out, put in the implants. Okay, here we go. About 2 months later, after having the implants, I started feeling sick again.
Oh no. And oh my gosh. And your daughter, I mean, I didn't want to
Yeah.
interrupt you while you were talking about her. We don't think about the little sentences, the things that we say or do that our children end up grasping onto. It doesn't even occur to us. Like, it didn't even occur to you that your daughter thought you had lied to her.
Yes.
You honestly thought you would be back,
Yeah,
but it,
I did.
and you have COVID where, um, I don't think any of us expected the communication to just shut down between hospitals and families, which it did.
Yes.
It was a very unprecedented time. So that
Yes.
only added really complex layers to what you were going through. Oh my gosh, your poor daughter. She
Yeah.
felt so betrayed. And meanwhile, it didn't even occur to you that she felt betrayed by you saying, I'll be back later tonight.
Right.
You were basically fighting for your life.
Yes.
Okay, so now we're at sepsis number 2, the
Yes.
sequel. Yeah.
The sequel.
The sequel.
So I have these implants, and one day I went to, at that time I was going to a massage therapist, and she went to kind of like touch my chest area, and she was like, "You feel really warm." She's like, "Are you feeling okay?" And I'm like, you know, I don't feel quite right, but I didn't feel like I had a fever. And she was like, "Feel this." She's like, your chest feels really warm, whereas this side didn't feel warm. She was like,
Wow.
"I can't work on you." She was like, "I want you to go to the emergency room." She's like, it may not be anything. She's like, "But I don't, whatever's going on." She's like, "If I start to massage there, I don't want to aggravate whatever may be
Thankfully,
potentially, yes,
right? I'm
potentially
so
happening."
glad she
Yes,
she noticed that difference and was very mindful of it and said something to you. Oh my
yes.
gosh. Wow.
Um, we had been working together for a few months at that point, so she really knew
Mhm.
my body, and then trying to like soften the look of the implants because they just looked like this hard mass. So I was getting, lymphatic massages from her. And, that day, and she was just like, as soon as she put her hand on me, she was like, Something's not right." She was like, "So please," she was like, "it will make me feel better if you just go to the emergency room, and then we can pick up on our session maybe next week." So I'm like, "Okay." Call my doctor. I'm like, "Well, my chest feels a little bit warm." So, of course, I have to go back down to the hospital, call my daughter, and then I tell her, "I'm going to the hospital. I will see you when I get home." So this time I didn't put a time frame on it. Blood work after a day, I'm like, "Okay, that you're not saying anything. I'm going to be, released." As soon as I think I'm about to be released, the doctors came in and were like, "Well, started to grow. So you'll be staying here. We're going to have to take the implants out." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" So yeah, I was
So,
sepsis
Kiana, when
again.
you say started to grow for our audience, what Kiana means is that the blood cultures they took started to
Yes,
grow bacteria and showed
yes,
that you had bacteria in your blood, which is sepsis,
yes,
right?
correct.
Oh my. So you had to stay.
Had to stay, got it cleared up. And then plastic surgeons again, here they are. They're like, "Okay, well, here we go. Here's the options that we have for you. We can do a different brand of implants because these implants obviously had to come out, or we can go back to what we said before. We can either do like a deep flap, we can do fat grafting." I'm like, "I don't want to do any of those things. I already feel tortured and mutilated. This is now my second emergency surgery because of this. What are the other options besides those things?" And it wasn't until then that they told me, "Well, you could stay flat." And it was like a bell went off in my head, like, your body does not like anything foreign in it. That's what I want to do. And it was like, "Are you sure?" "Yes, that's what I want to do." I didn't even talk it over with my husband at that point. That was the decision I made because I felt like if he loved me truly, it wouldn't even matter to him. And it didn't. But I was like, where was this option in the beginning of us talking about reconstruction versus non-reconstruction? Like that conversation never even happened. And that should be one of the options, to be
Mm-hmm.
aesthetically flat.
Mm-hmm.
And there's nothing wrong with that. And, it was almost like, well, you're still a young woman. And I'm like, regardless of whether I have breast or no breast, I'm still going to be a beautiful young woman. And
Right.
I really feel like the narrative around that really needs to change.
Yes. And
Uh,
I think it is, but it shouldn't have happened that way then. And the other part of the conversation that needs to be made very clear are, and I'm sure it is when you're signing your consent, but while you're sitting in that chair having the discussion about this, is the risks that what you experienced are very real risks of sepsis that
yes,
can be life changing.
yes,
They, right. I mean, people that experience sepsis, is a life threatening condition that can have long reaching ramifications if it's not caught early. And luckily, because you had someone very mindful the second time who felt the warmth, it was caught early. And then the first time you called and said, I just don't feel right. Oftentimes, I say to people, if you feel fluish, if you feel achy, someone who's under treatment, or has had surgery, call your doctor. But back to what you're going through. So, what was your husband's reaction to your decision?
he actually was so supportive. And then, after I told him, he actually said to me, he was like, I kind of wish you had have done that to begin with. But, he was like, it was your decision. He was like, that way you wouldn't have had to put your body through so much trauma. I mean, having essentially three surgeries back to back, all less than a year, and then we didn't even talk about the 8 times that I had seromas. So now I have drains on my sides, because of fluid
Wow.
buildup. So
Right.
it was a lot. And thinking back on it now, I'm like, wow, I probably had BII that whole time, breast implant illness, which a lot of doctors really don't believe in. But, I'm like, well, with all the fluid buildup that I kept having while I had the tissue expanders and the implants, the signs were all there
Mm-hmm.
that my body was rejecting this.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know what it is where society feels like you need to meet a certain criteria or you have to look a certain way in order to be accepted. And I feel like that's a fear for a lot of women, especially younger women that may have breast cancer. They do this out of fear of wanting to still have breasts.
Right.
That honestly, I mean, unless you have kids and you're breastfeeding, serve really no purpose to me. But
Right.
it's a conversation that doesn't happen, and it really does need to happen. I tell my daughter all the time. I mean, she looks at my scars. I don't shy away from them with her, and you know, she touches them, and she's like, "Mommy," and she'll like touch my chin. She's like, "You're still beautiful. It's
Oh,
okay." And I'm like, "Yes, I am," and that's what the world needs to see. Yes, I can honestly say before breast cancer, I wouldn't even take my shirt off at the beach or at the pool. I always had a cover up on because I felt so self conscious even back then. But now I can say, and it sounds weird when I say this, like cancer has given me a confidence that I have never had before. And when I'm out doing photo shoots or I'm at these speaking events, I'll wear something low cut. So you'll see, you can see my little scars, you can see my tattoos. But guess what? I'm here. I'm fierce. I'm here to fight for you. I'm here to, just show the world that it didn't change me being this beautiful being. as a matter of fact, it probably boosted that a little bit as far as, like I said, my confidence level. Um, Doing modeling, which I never thought I would do, that was never my thing. I'm actually more of a tomboy. Wow, yes, this is where it's at. Showing people that you can conquer the world and be breastless too. I'm a superhero to my child. And she tells me that all the time. She's like, "Mommy, you're a superhero." Yes, I wear a cape with an S on my chest, proudly.
You're a superhero to me.
Oh,
And
thank
I hope
you.
that your story is inspiring to women who are facing this decision or will be facing this decision, and to have an honest conversation with their doctors, shared decision making with their doctors, where the real rubber hits the road conversation about what does it really mean to have reconstructive surgery. It's not just about the cosmetic piece of it. What does it really feel like? What are truly the risks of it? Yes, it's discussed in the consent, but what does it really mean to me over the next 6 months? How am I going to feel?
Right,
Um, and how are they going to feel? Am I going to have sensation in them, or is it cosmetic? And also understanding, to some women that is very important to have that. They that is part of their identity. And I'm very glad from that perspective that this is now supported. A long time ago, there wasn't that choice. But
right,
now women can feel free to have that choice. And
right,
they need to feel free. Like the narrative, as you were saying, needs to be there. The narrative of what does this really mean? What am I entering in, as far as what is this surgery going to mean to me over the next 6 months? What is it going to mean to my family? What are the true risks? And am I going to have breasts with feeling back in them, or is it cosmetic? How does that work? And so I do believe those conversations are happening, but they need to really be in depth, because this is a hard surgery to go through.
yes,
As you know, it's
yes,
hard. Reconstruction is not easy. I'm so glad your husband's supportive
yes,
and he finds you beautiful, and that you're modeling, and a link to your book, which has you with your big beautiful pink hat on, which isn't your hat, but but it is in all of our minds.
yes.
So tell us how that happened.
Oh, right. So, before breast cancer, I would say I was a very complex person. And if you loved me, you really had to really love me. I was very standoffish, and a lot of things that kind of shaped the way that I thought and how I treated people stemmed from past childhood trauma, which I felt like I was always in the fight or flight mode since a young child. And as a young child, I learned through different events that happened to me, I'll just put it that way, that the world was not a safe place and that people that you trust aren't always there to keep you safe. So that was always my mindset of, like, whenever there was someone interested in me, and I'm like, you're just going to hurt me, so I don't want to deal with you. And I had this very hard exterior where in actuality it was just me crying out for help, and I didn't know how to navigate those feelings. So the only way that I knew how, which is what a lot of other people do, is they turn to drugs or alcohol or whatever their addiction may be at that time. And I was very functional doing a lot of these drugs. I was in college. I still made the president's and the dean's list. I graduated with honors. And because I was away from my family, no one knew what I was going through. And my boyfriend at the time, who happens to be my husband now, um, he gave me an ultimatum. He was like, I can't watch you do this to yourself anymore. And we broke up. And once I moved back home, and my mom physically saw me, it was like a, oh my God, what happened to my daughter? What is happening to you? What has happened to you? When my ex kind of came back into the picture and we just started talking a little bit, that breakup needed to happen. And for a long time, even after I got cancer, I blamed myself. I blame myself, number one, my brother, which a lot of people know passed away. He was murdered. The last time that I saw him, we actually got into an argument. 2 days later, he was murdered, and we never got to resolve any of our issues or the problems that we had, because in your mind, you always think that there's time, and time waits for no one. So when I found out that I had cancer, I was like, wow, this is my karma. That's where my mind went. Like, this is my karma for, not that I was a bad person, but, I didn't treat people with the utmost respect, or I was very judgmental. Having breast cancer gave me a lot of internal reflection. And I really, really had to really deep down inside myself to say, maybe this is the change that you need to become more empathetic and understanding of people's situations. And that, just because you're going through different things, you shouldn't be judged on it, because we all go through things. We've all done things that we're not proud of. Um, so it really changed the way that I viewed the world, how I viewed myself, even though there are times when I think about my brother, and I think about him very often, that I still do struggle with, our last conversation, and how I wish that I can go back, but I can't. And it just made me just navigate the world a little bit differently. And even how I treat myself, because I am my own worst enemy. I will pick apart things that I did or didn't do, or I should have done this, or I could have done this, or I could do this better. I am my own worst enemy. And I had to learn to stop that. So it has really helped me be a lot more positive in my life and in other people's lives, and to kind of break down that wall that I had. I mean, I still have some of my fears naturally, but it's easier now for me to let people in. I mean, I've gone on retreats with women I didn't know, and I tell you what, we talk almost every day now. So, I wasn't that person before. I would never have gone anywhere with strangers. Spending the night with strangers, that would have been so scary for me. But it has really opened up my eyes to a lot. And I'm happy in a sense. Like, I'm sad that I had to go through all of that in order to recognize these things in myself, but it was necessary. It needed to happen. Something had to happen as an intervention for me.
The shared experience, first of all, is invaluable. When you're with other people, you're a survivor, and you're with other people that are survivors, because they get it. And you're not vulnerable with them. They've all been, and you don't have to explain anything. They've been in the same boat, or you have to explain very little. But the fact that you went from what you called a hard person, or a hard exterior, to opening yourself up to other people, that'd be a really tough step for you, to go on retreats,
Yeah.
to talk with other people. I mean, to make that step, because a lot of people still would hang back. The Kiana I'm talking with and have spoken with is probably one of the most gracious, warm, wise people I've ever met.
Yeah, it was really like a 360 change. Like, I have done so much, meditation, counseling, anything that I felt like I needed to do to become the version of myself that I felt like I needed, that I didn't have. That's what I want people to see.
You've accomplished it with flying colors. And I love how vibrant of a person you are now, and engaging with being around other women, and engaging in showing that you are beautiful as you are, and being in what you described to me as a very rich and collaborative marriage with your husband, and full of love,
Yes.
mutual respect. It's a beautiful thing. I sent you this question, and I'm sure it's a hard question to answer, but how do you think being Black has impacted your journey, from maybe additional barriers and maybe additional support from the people around you?
Definitely think, and I hate to think this way, but I definitely think it played a factor in some of the earlier treatments that I received.
Mm-hmm.
And um, there was this one time where I didn't know what I was experiencing. I noticed that my arms and my hands were very tingly and numb. And, my doctor at that time said to me, well, if you were experiencing that, it would have happened within this amount of time and not this amount of time. You're way past that. And it was almost like, to me, you're calling me a liar. That's
Right.
basically
I
what you're
mean,
saying to
you're
me.
feeling it. He's denying that you're feeling what you're feeling, what
Right.
you're reporting.
I'm
Yeah.
like, so it was more of like, well, if you're feeling that, then you need to see a neurologist. So I had to find my own neurologist. And then they sent the referral over so that they did what's called a EEG and a skin nerve biopsy test, and they both showed that I had neuropathy, which I didn't
Right.
know about. So
Right.
that wasn't anything that was explained to me, like, hey, this may happen. So if you start to experience that, you need to let us know. And it was like I had to go through hoops just to prove something that I was already saying to you. And I feel like this happens a lot. I'm in a lot of different, breast cancer groups, a lot of them being for women of color. Um, and a lot of them say the same things. Like they tell their doctors that they're experiencing things, and it's almost like they're being dismissed. And this is why we have issues as to why we don't say things, because there's that fear of not being believed, or that
Right.
it's
Which is
nothing.
really hurtful and insulting.
Yes,
Yeah. So you fear bringing it up because you fear you're going to get knocked down, and then it makes you not want to go back.
correct.
Right. Wow. And meanwhile, what you're experiencing is peripheral neuropathy, and you must have had a taxane based chemotherapy, from what I'm guessing from what you're
Yes,
describing.
yes,
Okay. And that is something that absolutely you should have been informed of. And also, through each treatment, someone should have asked you, are you experiencing any numbness or tingling? Wow. And then when you say something to your doctor who knows you're receiving taxane based therapy, and if your doctor's listening, I'm really sorry. I don't mean to sound like I'm pounding on you. I apologize, but they're disbelieving you. I mean, who knows? Everybody's body is different. Who
right,
knows when they're actually going to start experiencing that? But,
right.
um, oh my gosh, Kiana. But
Yes,
then when you go to groups and you're talking about it and what your experience is being validated. So I'm on behalf of chemotherapy infusion nurses everywhere. I'm really sorry that happened to you,
thank
because that's
you.
part of a toxicity assessment.
Right,
Manage.
right. I just I let it linger for a little bit because I'm like, I don't know what's going on here, and luckily I did, because now I'm on, medication to try to help with those symptoms. I still have the breakthrough pain and the sensations, but it's not as bad. But,
Mm-hmm.
like you said, just having that talk, just saying, hey, this is a side effect that may happen. So if you do start to experience this, you need to let us know, and not making me feel like, um, if I have a concern, I can't come to my doctor about it. That doesn't work very well.
Right. I'm really sorry that the conversation with your doctor went that way. And that's one of the reasons why self advocacy is so important, really understanding and shared decision making and empowerment, to
Yeah.
avoid the conversations you've been having and you're
Right.
having in your circle of women, you need to feel empowered.
Right.
So if you have someone who knocks you down like that, then you go to the next person. It's your life, your symptoms, your quality of life, your ability to enjoy your quality of life that are being affected by that.
Right.
And so you need to feel empowered to then have a conversation with another person, as opposed to
Absolutely.
just can't, I can't ask questions anymore.
It happens so often that and
Yes.
people don't realize it. I mean, we just had a discussion the other day, and there are women that feel like, like you said, they just don't ask the questions because they feel like they're going to get shut down. And I'm like, do you know that the doctor works for you? You can fire them. That's what I do. And I go to the next one if I feel like I'm not getting what I need. And it could be something so simple, but having cancer is scary. And then the thought of
Mm-hmm.
reoccurrence, pain can just be a symptom. I'm like, well, everyone has a little bit of pain, but is this pain I'm experiencing now something for me to worry about? So yes, sometimes it seems like we're being um, hypochondriacs, as I've been told. But you've also never been in this realm, so while that may be what it looks like to you, that's not what it's like for us. It's a scary place to be.
And so you're saying, I need help because I'm having pain every day. And I don't want this to sound like we're beating up oncologists. Oncologists have trained hard to be where they're at. So everybody
Yes.
listening, write your questions down before you see your oncologist, because you have a short visit and that uses your time with them to advocate for yourself better. And they're dedicated to what they do.
Yes.
But empower yourself to write your question down, write your symptoms down, write what days it occurs on, write how it feels, write when it's worse, when it's better, and what makes it feel better, what makes it feel worse. And so, who can I go talk to make this better? Or I'm going to go and talk to the practice manager and see if there's someone else in this office that I can talk with, such as a physician's assistant or someone, or get a referral to someone. But please help me. Or
Yes.
if you're having symptoms and you don't feel like you can bring them up, and it's really hard to do, bring someone with you who will ask the questions for you, because they don't have the same stakes in the conversation that you do. Your journey, while it's been a painful one from the time you were a little girl and the interaction you've had with your brother and the regrets you've had, the person you are now, the vibrant, giving, loving, warm, I'm going to start crying, warm
I
person
do.
that you are now, who can give so much love. You're amazing, Kiana.
Thank you.
Anything else you'd like to share?
Really, just like you said before, it's really important to be your own advocate. If something doesn't feel right to you, it's okay. It's okay for you to go in a totally different direction that a lot of people may not understand. It's not for them to understand. It's not their journey. You, you are the key to your happiness. You dictate how you want your journey to be, what you don't want. And man, it's a journey. It's not for the weak, but you can do it. I want people to
And you
know that you can do it.
and you can find beauty along the way,
Absolutely.
and friends along the way.
Oh,
And yes, look at
yes.
you. Look at that smile.
Oh,
If
God.
people are listening, that smile on your face. You say you talk with those people you went on a retreat with every day
Yes.
now.
Yes. I mean, and they're from all over. There's a lady in Sweden that I talked to who she's like, come visit me. I'll take you and we can go to Paris. It's only like a 3-hour train ride. So it's like really like a sisterhood of people. California. I can't even think of all the places that these women came from, but we came together as one for the same purpose, to educate, show visibility, to show that we're flat, but you know what? We're still beautiful and we can conquer the world. And I wouldn't change it for anything in the world. I mean, I couldn't imagine my life without them in it, honestly.
I can't wait till we talk again. I hope we get to meet in person soon.
Yes, that would be great.
Thank you for your time today, Kiana. It was really amazing to have you here.
Thank you so much, Jill.
Thank you for joining us on this episode of the Everything Cancer podcast. We hope you found the conversation as insightful and as inspiring as we did. Remember, all the details about our guest, including their contact information and links to resources they've shared on their websites, will be included in the show notes. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider supporting us by visiting our website, checking out our Patreon page, or becoming a sponsor. Your support helps us to continue to bring you these important discussions. Don't forget to subscribe to the Everything Cancer podcast on your favorite platform and follow us on social media. Always remember, the information shared here is not intended as medical advice. For any personal health concerns, please consult with your healthcare team. Thank you so much for listening, and we look forward to having you back with us again next time.